I'm going to share with you the story of King Hezekiah, taken from Isaiah 36 to 39. The first part of the book ends in chapter 39. And the first 5 chapters of Isaiah is introductory. And chapter 6 is the commissioning of the prophets. And then chapter 7, we have King Ahaz, who was not trusting the Lord. And then at the end of the part 1, these last 4 chapters, we have the story of Hezekiah. So I've been telling you all along, like there's a structure. The theme is the 2 kings, one trusting the Lord and the other one did not. And this is a structure of the writer. So today I'm going to share with you the 2nd king, Hezekiah, and we'll go to chapter 36. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah reign. Now this is year 701 BC. Now, a little bit of the background of the chapter. Since the days of Ahaz, when he sent money to the Assyrian king to attack Israel and Syria. Now, the Assyrian Empire has become the superpower of that day, and almost every country, every state has become vassal states to Assyria, and they have been paying heavy tribute to Assyria, and will be a heavy burden of everyone. And so generally people were not happy, and they were looking for chances to revolt against Assyria. And about 705 BC, so it's about 4 years before chapter 6, the powerful king Sargon II of Assyria died, and his son Sennacherib ascended to the throne. And he was perceived as being weak, and so many countries took that as a chance to revolt, led by Babylon. And also Judah was part of that revolt too. So Sennacherib spent the first 4 years of his reign defeating Babylon. And after he done that, he turned around and come to attack Judah for his revolt. And history books told us the king quickly conquered 46 fortified cities in Judah and deported over 200,000 people. Now he's close to, so we read, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the 45 cities of Judah and captured them. Now he's close to the end, and he's going to the largest of them, of these cities, would be Jerusalem. And the king of Assyria sent his field commanders with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. So Lachish is not too far from Jerusalem. And instead of laying a long siege of Jerusalem, he hoped to intimidate Hezekiah into surrender. Would be a lot easier than fighting against him. So he sent his commander, and then with a large army. So the idea is to intimidate Judah. And when the commander stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Now this is the same place 33 years ago. Isaiah met Ahaz at the same spot. And verse 3, Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna, the secretary, and Joel, son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to him. So Hezekiah sent out 3 officials to meet with the field commander of King Assyria. Verse 4, the field commander said to them, "Tell Hezekiah, this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing the confidence of yours? You say you have counsel and might for war, but you speak only empty words. On whom are you depending that you rebel against me? No, I know you're depending on Egypt, that splintered reed of staff, which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it. Such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who depend on him." So the field commander was trying to wage psychological warfare. And so immediately he said, you want to depend on Egypt? One time we already defeated Egypt. Egypt is not dependable. You depend on him, you're going to get hurt yourself. And verse 7, "But you will say to me, we're depending on the Lord our God. Isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed the same to Judah and Jerusalem? You must worship before the altar." And then a second argument, he said, and probably King Hezekiah and Isaiah have been telling the people, we can depend on the Lord. And so the field commander seems to have some intelligence or information, because Hezekiah was doing reform, religious reform. So he tore down all the high places of worship, because the law only allows worship in the temple, only one place. But the people may not be able to understand. So he was using the argument. So you are tearing down all the high places and altars, and you must be displeasing your law. So how is he going to help you? And the people may not understand, because they were the one that worshipped at the high place in the first place. So it can be an argument. They can buy it. It's always, the field commanders are always trying to twist, tell something, some truth, but always twisting some truth. And the third argument he came up with, "Come now, make a bargain with my master, the king of Syria. I'll give you 2,000 horses if you can put riders on them. How can you repulse one officer of the least of my master's officials, even though you are depending on Egypt for chariots and horsemen?" And so he's saying, well, I give you 2,000 horses. You didn't even have enough men to mount on those horses to become an army. Look how little your army is. How can you fight against Assyria? Okay, verse 10, another argument. "Furthermore, have I come to attack and destroy this land without the law? The Lord himself told me to march against this country and destroy it." And again, he's trying to mount an argument, because in Isaiah 8:7-8, Isaiah actually prophesied, "The Lord will bring against Judah the mighty flood waters of Euphrates, the king of Assyria, and sweep on into Judah." So he's right. There was a prophecy that Assyria is going to attack Judah. But then verse 10 of chapter 8 actually says Assyria would not succeed. So he's only using part of the information, just like Satan attacking us, usually twisted information. Verse 11, then Eliakim, Shebna, and Joah said to the field commanders, "Please speak to your servants in Aramaic, since we understand it. Don't speak to us in Hebrew, in the hearing of the people on the wall." So only speak us in the diplomatic language of the day, but not Hebrew, so that people in the listening on the wall would not understand, and they would not be intimidated. But the commander replied, "Was it only to your master and you that my master sent me to say these things? Not to the people sitting on the wall, who, like you, will have to eat their own excrement and drink their own urine." So what he's saying is, when we besiege you, Lord, you will have nothing to eat except your own excrement, nothing to drink except your own urine. So again, intimidating the people. Verse 13, then the commander stood and called out in Hebrew, hear the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king says, do not let Hezekiah deceive you. He cannot deliver you. Do not let Hezekiah persuade you to trust in the Lord when he says, the Lord will surely deliver us. The city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Verse 16, do not listen to Hezekiah. This is what the king of Assyria says. Make peace with me and come out to me. Then each of you will eat fruit from your own vine, and fig tree, and drink water from your own cistern, until I come and take you to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards. Again, we can see the psychological warfare he's inflicting on the Judeans. He said, look, you can come out and to me, like submit to me, and right away, the tension will be released. You can eat your own fruit and tend your own wine and fig tree, and just drink your water, and you'll be at ease. And then what? Until I come to take you to some place, because that's the policy, and everyone knows of the Assyrians. They would depopulate the local population, and then say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to take you to a land just with grain and new wine, bread and vineyards, just like what you have here." 18. Do not let Hezekiah mislead you when he says, "The Lord will deliver us." Have the gods of any nations ever delivered their lands from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Haman and Apad? Where are the gods of Seraphim? Have they rescued Samaria from my hand? Who of all the gods of this country have been able to save their lands from me? How then can the Lord deliver Jerusalem from my hand? So, you want to depend on your God? Look, all the countries where the gods who hasn't fallen against Assyria. Verse 21, but the people remained silent and said nothing in reply, because the king had commanded, do not answer them. Then Eliakim, son of Hezekiah, the palace administrator, and Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, went to Hezekiah with their clothes torn and told him what the field commander had said. So these officials went back and reported to Hezekiah. Chapter 37. When Hezekiah heard this, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and went into the temple of the Lord. And then he went to the temple himself, but he sent Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shebna, the secretary, and the leading priests, all wearing sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos. They told him, this is what Hezekiah says. This day is a day of distress and rebuke and disgrace, as when children come to the moment of birth and there's no strength to deliver them. So we cannot deliver ourselves from the attack of the Assyrian. And if we cannot, like a mother cannot deliver a baby, the mother will die. So we're going to die. So verse 4, it may be that the Lord your God will hear the words of the field commander. Now I think here it shows a little bit of weak in faith of Hezekiah. If these are the instructions of Hezekiah to Isaiah, because he said, the Lord your God. He's not saying the Lord my God or our God. So it seems, Isaiah, you've been preaching that the Lord will save us. So now the Lord your God, whom this master, the king of Assyria, has sent to ridicule the living God, that he will rebuke him for the words the Lord your God has heard. Therefore pray for the remnant that still survives. So the king asked Isaiah to pray for the people of Jerusalem. Verse 5, when King Hezekiah official came to Isaiah, Isaiah said to them, so even before, they tell him all the words, the Lord already have a reply from Isaiah to them. That tell your master, this is what the Lord says. Do not be afraid of what you have heard. Those words with which the underlings of King Assyria has blasphemed me. Listen, when he hears a certain report, I'll make him want to return to his own country. And there I'll have him cut down with the sword. Verse 8, when the field commander heard that the king of Assyria had left Lachish, he withdrew and found the king fighting against Libnah. So after the field commander did his job of waging the psychological warfare against Judah, he went back to report to the king, and the king was doing some more up, finished his mission at Lachish, and now he was fighting in Libnah. And at that time, verse 9, when Sennacherib received a report from Tirhakah, the king of Cush, was marching out to fight against him. When he heard it, he sent messengers to Hezekiah with the word. Now, this is Tirhakah, king of Cush. Actually, this king was also ruling Egypt at that time. So this is the help maybe that Hezekiah was trying to get help from. And so he heard that the Egyptian army is coming. And so then he sent a messenger directly himself to Hezekiah with these words. He said, say to Hezekiah, king of Judah, do not let the God you depend on deceive you. When he said, Jerusalem will not be given into the hands of a king of Assyria. Surely you have heard what the king of Assyria have done to all the countries, destroying them completely. And will you be delivered? The gods of the nations that were destroyed by my predecessors delivered them. The gods of Gozan, Haran, Rephset, and the people of Eden who were in Tel Assar. Where is the king of Hamath or the king of Arpad? Where are the kings of Lair, Seraphim, Hina, and Eva? So King Sennacherib sent a direct message to Hezekiah saying, don't you want to believe your God could deliver you? Look at all these gods. Any one of them has been able to deliver them. So verse 14, Hezekiah received the letter from the messenger and read it. Then he went up to the temple of the Lord and spread it out before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim. You alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Give ear, Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see. Listen to all the words Sennacherib has sent to ridicule the living God. 18. It's true, Lord, that the Assyrian kings have laid waste all these people and their lands. They have thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them, for they were not gods, but only wood and stone, fashioned by human hands. Now, Lord, our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, Lord, are the only God. And so we here see the great faith of Hezekiah at this point. Because if you don't believe the God you have, the one that you trust in is the living God, then the outcome of Hezekiah would not be very good. So really, he has the great faith. It's just like us when we are faced with the insurmountable difficulties, all these enemies, and if we don't believe God is a living one, then we would really actually lose faith. So with this, maybe the word of Isaiah had encouraged Hezekiah, because you remember a while ago, Hezekiah was saying, the Lord your God, and now he really took hold of his faith. And he said, you are the living God, enthroned between cherubim, and you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth, because you have made them all. And so you are not like the other gods. And yes, and these are other gods that could not defend their land against Assyria. But being the living God, show them your true color. Verse 21, and then Isaiah son of Amos sent a message to Hezekiah. And so through Isaiah, God answered Hezekiah's prayer. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Because you have prayed to me concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria, this is the word of the Lord has spoken against him. Virgin daughter Zion despises and mocks you. Daughter Jerusalem tosses her head as you flee. Now here, Assyria is pictured as a villain, a strong man, attacking, wanting, almost like raping a feeble young female, so virgin daughter. And yet the little daughter of Zion was not afraid, and he even mocks at that strong villain. He said, tosses her head as you flee. Who is it you have ridiculed and blasphemed? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your eyes up in pride? Against the Holy One of Israel. By your messengers you have ridiculed the Lord. And you said, with my many chariots I have ascended the heights of the mountains, the utmost heights of Lebanon. I cut down its tallest cedars, the choicest of its junipers. I reached its remotest heights, the finest of its forests. I've dug wells in foreign lands and drunk the water there with the soles of my feet. I've dried up all the streams of Egypt. So the Assyrian king is saying, all these highest mountains and all these places, the strongest countries and remotest place, I have all conquered. Verse 26, have you not heard? Long ago I ordained it, in days of old I planted it. Now I have brought it to pass that you have turned the 45 cities into piles of stone. The people drained of power are dismayed and put to shame. They are like plants in the field, like tender green shoots, like grass sprouting on the roof, scorched before it grows up. But the Lord is telling here, all this that you've done, all Assyrian, the many countries you conquered, actually, long ago I already ordained it. In the days of old, I already planned it. It's just coming to pass. Whatever I ordained, I planned. Because you remember we read the last time in the Isaiah chapter 10, the Lord says, Assyrian, you are only the rod of my anger. And in chapter 10, verse 12, God already knows the king of Assyria is going to say, so that's 30 some years ago, Isaiah already prophesied that Assyria is going to say, by my strength of my hand, I removed the boundaries of nations. I subdued their kings. So these actually were all foretold and ordained by God. And then chapter 10, Isaiah verse 15, does the axe raise itself alone above the person who swings it? So God is the one that is swinging the axe, and the axe being Assyria, and God is the one that is swinging it. So all that you've done is actually by God, through God. And so what's your prize all about? So verse 28, But I know where you are, and when you come and go, and how you rage against me. Because you rage against me, and because your insolence has reached my ears, I'll put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, and I'll make you return by the way you came. Verse 30, this will be the sign for you, Hezekiah. This year you will eat what grows by itself, and the second year what springs from that. But in the third year, sow and reap, plant vineyards and eat their fruits. So, like in a few years, all the crops will become normal, and we will eat what you grow, because Assyria will be gone, and you'll be doing your agriculture as usual. 31, once more a remnant of the kingdom of Judah will take root below and bear fruit. For out of Jerusalem will come a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. So, as I said, Assyrian, when Sennacherib, he came fiercely. He already conquered 45 cities and deported over 200,000 Judeans. But now there's but he would not succeed in attacking Jerusalem. So there would be a remnant of the kingdom of Judah that would be left. They would take root and bear fruit, and there would come a remnant, survivors, because that's what the law dictates. Verse 33, therefore this is what the Lord says concerning the king of Assyria. He will not enter this city or shoot an arrow here. He will not come before it with shield or build a siege ram against it. By the way that he came, he will return. He will not enter the city, declares the Lord. I'll defend the city and save it, for my sake and for the sake of David, my servant. Verse 36, then the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. When the people got up the next morning, they were all the dead bodies. So Sennacherib, king of Syria, broke camp and withdrew. He returned to Nineveh and stayed there. So overnight, the Lord just sent his angel and killed 185 Assyrian soldiers. And this actually has been recorded by the secular historian Herodotus, and he recorded that a plague happened that night, and the Assyrian soldiers were killed. And so it seems to be an anticlimax. Just a couple of sentences, all the threat, everything is gone. In verse 38, one day while he was worshipping in the temple of his god Nisroch, his son Adremelech and Sherezer killed him with the sword. Now this is 20 years later. He was killed by his own sons. And then they escaped to the land of Ararat. And Esarhaddon, his son, succeeded him as king. So two of his sons killed him, and another son succeeded him as king. Now, it comes to this point that we have the chapter 36 and 37 about the great faith that Hezekiah has in the law and the miracle that the Lord has done. It seems that part one of Isaiah should end here. We have the story of two kings, right? Well, Ahab, who refused to trust in the law, and he ending badly with the Assyrians attacking, finally also attacked Judah. And now we have a king that has great faith. And with that, God was able to do the miracle and saving the country. And it seems to be story we should end here. And yet that's not how the story of Hezekiah ends. We have two more chapters, and 38 and 39. And then we soon find out these two chapters are actually not in chronological order. And that's to say, chapter 38 and 39 happened before chapter 37 and 38. And then we have another question to make us ponder. Why did Isaiah want to arrange? Why didn't he arrange things chronologically? Why did he want to reverse orders? And that may be something we need to ponder after reading these last two chapters. Chapter 38. In those days, Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. The prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, went to him and said, "This is what the Lord says. Put your house in order because you are going to die. You will not recover." Now, actually, Hezekiah was only 39 at that time. And verse 2. Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord. "Remember, Lord, how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion and have done what's good in your eyes." And Hezekiah wept bitterly. So what Hezekiah was saying was, I faithfully walk before you, just like Abraham, and wholeheartedly devoted you. And Hezekiah did a lot of reform in Judah. And so I don't deserve to die at this young age. So verse 4. Then the word of the Lord came to Isaiah, "Go and tell Hezekiah, this is what the Lord, the God of your father David says. I have heard your prayers and seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life, and I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. I will defend this city." And that's why we know why these two chapters are out of the order, because this happened before king of Assyria came to attack Jerusalem. So I will deliver you and the city from the hand of king of Assyria. So this happened before chapter 37 and 38. Now, according to the same version of the story recorded, 2 King chapter 18, the sequence of the story is like this. So God promised to heal Hezekiah, and actually Isaiah also delivered the word that in 3 days, on the third day, that he would be well enough to go up to the temple. And then Isaiah applied some fix onto the boils of Hezekiah, and then he was healed. And then Hezekiah asked, "Can you give me a sign that I'll be able to go to the temple on my third day?" And this is in chapter verse 7, and this is the Lord's sign to you. And so the Lord actually fulfilled and gave him a sign that he will be able to go to the temple on the third day. Verse 7, this is the Lord's sign to you, that the Lord will do what he has promised. "I will make the shadow cast by the sun go back the 10 steps it has gone down on the stairway of Ahaz." So there's some kind of a sundial marking time, so called the stairway of Ahaz. So the sun went back the 10 steps it had gone down. So actually it was given a choice. You can either advance the time or go back the time. And then Hezekiah say, make it go back 10 steps. So make the time go back, which probably was harder. And so God fulfilled his request, and the sunlight went back the 10 steps it had gone down. Okay, so Hezekiah was healed, and then he composed a psalm. It's kind of more of a meditation on death, and then also thanksgiving. So verse 9, a writing of Hezekiah, king of Judah, after his illness and recovery. I said, in the prime of my life, must I go through the gates of death and be robbed of the rest of my years? I said, I will not again see the Lord himself in the land of the living. No longer will I look on my fellow men or be with those who now dwell in this world. Now, at that time, the idea of death is people when they died, the only understanding they have is they will be going into Sheol. It's a place where your spirit is there and you will just remain there, and they didn't know what's happened. And so it's right. So you not only rob the rest of his years, but he's in a place in the abode of Sheol. Not much fun to be there. And then later on, the idea of we would have a resurrected life. Actually, that revelation only would come later. In the book of Daniel, we'll be talking about resurrection. So that would the resurrected life is later and obvious. In the New Testament times, Paul says, like to die is to be with the Lord. It would be the best thing. To be. And I remember Sister May, like Pastor Gideon's wife, and she said, and she told her husband Gideon and also the other pastors, he said, if I die, don't you pray for my return of my life. If I come back, I'll beat you all up. So nowadays we don't mind, because obviously we felt the sadness of all the people, our family, relative, friends will no longer be like with us. But then to be with the Lord, in the New Testament, is a much more joyful thing that it's something we can also look forward to. But we don't blame Hezekiah, because at that time there's no revelation. If we don't know what you'll be doing in Sheol except simply existing there. Okay, verse 12. Like a shepherd's tent, my house has been pulled down and taken from me. So Hezekiah was making the analogy. Right now, I'm just living in a shepherd's tent. And we know the shepherds, it's so temporary. Every night or soon, the tent will be moved to another place of pasture for the flock. So he said, my tent will be pulled down and taken from me. And he's also making another analogy. He said, like a weaver, I've rolled up my life, and he has cut me off from the loom. So the idea is, we know the weaver used the loom to make fabrics, like make clothes. And so when the clothes came out of the loom, it would be rolled up, and after certain length, after the roll gets a certain size, then you have to cut the cloth from the loom. So he's saying, I roll up my life, and he will be cutting off from the loom. So day and night you made an end of me. So like he seems to be saying, like Hezekiah, like describing his experience, is like, it seems like anytime I can die. I waited patiently till dawn. I think his idea is patiently, I wanted to have some recovery. Till dawn, like the dawn would be like the recovery. But like a lion, he broke all my bones, and day and night he made an end of me. So instead of able to look for some good news, recovery, and now I was just like anguish. I cried like a swift or thrush. These are all birds. Moaned like a mountain dove. So all he could come out was just moaning voices. My eye grew weak as I looked to the heavens. I'm being threatened, Lord, come to my aid. Verse 15, but what can I say? He has spoken to me, and he himself has done this. So Hezekiah also has submitted to the whatever God has ordained for him. Because he said, God, he knows he's in God's hands, and it's God's idea that it's time for him to be gone. So I will walk humbly all my years because of this anguish of my soul. But after going through this kind of a death or near-death experience, what did it teach me? It taught me to walk humbly all my years. Verse 16, Lord, by such things people live, and my spirits find life in them too. So it seems my spirit has learned a lesson. My spirit has changed, has learned the lesson. And then it's through this kind of spiritual lesson that we can live a better life, a more God-oriented life. You restore me to health and let me live. Surely it was for my benefit that I suffer such anguish. We have to admire like what the insight Hezekiah has in the sickness, in time of death. And he learned that the humility, he learns, is for my benefit that he suffered such anguish. And it's in your love you kept me from the pit of destruction, so from going to Sheol. You put all my sins behind your back. For the grave cannot praise you, death cannot sing your praise. Those who go down to the pits cannot hope for your faithfulness. The living, they praise you, as I'm doing today. Parents tell their children about your faithfulness. The Lord will save me, and will sing with string the instruments all the days of our lives in the temple of the Lord. So, yes, he responded God's healing with praises. Now, verse 21, Isaiah has said, prepare a poultice of figs and apply it to the boil, and he will recover. Verse 22, Hezekiah had asked, what will be the sign that I'll go up to the temple of the Lord? Now, I think these two verses are misplaced, and I already read to you the version according to 2 King, and they are a little bit earlier. Okay, we'll come to the last chapter, chapter 39. At that time, Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent King Hezekiah letters and gifts because he had heard of his illness and recovery. Now you have to marvel at the intelligence of these ancient days. They don't have, for sure, they didn't have internet. So how did news travel so quickly? I mean, Babylon is thousands of kilometers away from Judah, and yet, it seems the news passed quickly to Babylon. And so Babylon sends Hezekiah a letter and a gift. And actually, I think what is contemplated here is more than just an ordinary congratulations that are healed of the severe sickness. Babylon was the country that was the leading revolt, the country that led the revolt against Assyrians. And so Babylon always wants to get other nations to join Babylon in revolting against Assyria. So it's an occasion for him to send the gift, and also doing diplomacy and saying hey, it's time that we can look for the time to fight against Assyria. Okay, verse 2. Hezekiah received the envoys gladly and showed them what was in his storehouses: the silver, the gold, the spice, the fine oil, olive oil, the entire armory, and everything found among his treasures. There was nothing in his palace or in all his kingdom that Hezekiah did not show them. Wow. Oh, we have an important guest, like Babylon, or certainly a bigger country, a major country, big than, like small Judah. Now we have important, like representation or envoys from Babylon. So I have to show him how well I'm doing. So Hezekiah said, like brought out all, like all his belongings, and probably not probably not all his, probably a lot of them belong to the temple. And he said, oh, so, like right away, like I have to show him how well I'm doing. Like, his pride almost immediately, we can see, rose up. And so we are sad to, if we look back to chapter 8, the near-death experience that he's just gone through, and it seems everything he learned is quickly forgotten. He said, you remember in chapter 38, verse 2, he said, oh, remember, Lord, how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion, and have done what is good in your eyes. And then, and remember the poem, he says, now, chapter 38, 15. I will walk humbly all my years, but because of this anguish of my soul. Like 16, my such strange people live, and my spirit finds life in them too. And 17, surely it was my benefit that I suffered such anguish. In your love, you have kept me from the pit of destruction. It seems sad that right away, you thought you had learned life, near-death lessons, and it would be carved into your soul. But right away, when the opportunity to show your pride comes, right away, everything is forgotten, and the pride comes out right away. Verse 3, then Isaiah the prophet went to King Hezekiah and asked, what did those people say? And where did they come from? From a distant land, Hezekiah replied, they came to me from Babylon. So Isaiah also heard the story, and so he asked two questions. What did they say, and where did they come from? And Hezekiah would only answer the second part. They came from Babylon. But he didn't answer the first part. And I guess because Isaiah had been preaching that your trust be in the Lord only, not to make political alliance with other countries like Babylon. So maybe it's not something that Isaiah wants to hear. So he didn't give any answer to that part. And the prophet, so verse 4, the prophet asked, what did they see in your palace? They saw everything in my palace. There's nothing among my treasure that I did not show them. So we have to admire that Hezekiah is actually very honest. He showed him everything. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord Almighty. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your predecessors have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. And some of your descendants, your own flesh and blood, who will be born of you, will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Wow, this is quite something, quite a prophecy. Babylon was running for its life at that time, being pursued by Assyrian, and yet already Isaiah received the word. One day it will become big and powerful and going to come and carry all your treasures away from you, and even your children will become eunuchs there serving in the palace of Babylon. I guess we have to ask the question, was it just because that Hezekiah showed all his treasures to Babylon that brought about this fate? I don't think so, because actually what this shows is just the reason that Judah finally was exiled to Babylon. Actually it's actually reflected in the life of Hezekiah. It's kind of an inconsistent walk before the Lord. So it's possible that Hezekiah could have great faith, and right away we can see the inconsistency right away, or the near-death experience right away. Then he would also be showing his pride. And so it's this kind of walk it's not a consistent walk with the Lord that finally ruined Judah, because we know after Hezekiah and Manasseh came in, and he was the worst king of Judah. And so it's this kind of inconsistent walk that finally brought the fate of Judah to the captivity. And so verse 8, the word of the Lord you have spoken is good. Hezekiah replied, for he thought, there will be peace and security in my lifetime. Ooh, how pitiful. What kind of word that Hezekiah could say? Is that very good? Very good, because, at least there will be peace and security in my lifetime. As for my descendants, well, that's their business, So, such selfishness. How can, you just, so another kind of self-centeredness. We can see the self-centeredness in his pride of wanting to show all his treasures. And then now is another self-centeredness. He only cares about his own life. And that's sad, but that's also how true it is. So, so now we can maybe meditate a little bit. Why would Isaiah rearrange the order? We always want to remember our best. He should really, why didn't Isaiah have chapter 36 and 37? The great faith of Hezekiah is the last two chapters. But now he end up with like poor taste in our mouth. One of my best friends for over 60 years, he died in the COVID a few months ago, and I went to his funeral in November. And yeah, surely there was a lot of tributes paid to him, and he was he actually quit his job at the prime of his career, and then he wanted to serve the Lord full time, and he went to one of the most prestigious Bible school or theology school in Hong Kong, and became one of the fundraising officer, and he served the theology school well. So that day there were two former presidents of the theology school paying tribute to him, as well as many others. And they are all very good words, and no doubt he's a good friend of mine, and I'll still miss him. Very nice and very humorous person. Yet, knowing him for 60 years, we know we all have our shortcomings. Maybe we all like to be remembered on how well we are, but God sees how true we are. So maybe here God wants to show us that, how yes, Hezekiah could rise to great faith at certain moments, but there's inconsistency with his work. He could also to fall down. His life is also basically that of one of self-centeredness. And it seems that the story of two kings, we have Ahaz, obviously he would not trust the Lord. Now we end with the story of Hezekiah. We thought he would be who brought the salvation to the nation of Judah, and you brought them back to a righteous relationship with the Lord. And yet, sadly, even the good king also failed. And so now are we left with no hope? Even such a good king was still so self-centered inside. And so really, at the end, I think Isaiah closed the book like that, part one of the book like that, is really showing that really, humanly speaking, we're coming to the end. And there's no answer that can be done the human way. God has to intervene. And he has, in our hope or hopelessness, God is still our hope. And he's the one that loves us and faithful to us. And even the Judah has failed in the covenant relationship with God. And yet God, in his mercy, he would intervene and send someone that can really transform us from the inside to have a life that is God-oriented rather than self-oriented. And it's in God's mercy that he has done this, that in our hopelessness, that we still can find hope, or God will still provide us with that hope. And that is the coming of the Messiah. And that's why the book of Isaiah cannot end in chapter 39. It has to have the second part, and which is the revealing of the Messiah. And we praise the Lord for preparing our salvation that way, and that we can all hope in him and be transformed into his likeness. And praise God. And that's my message today. Amen. Yeah, so we'll send the time back to
Amen. Thank you. Brother Heng, would you just pray a blessing over this family?
Okay, sure. Heavenly Father, we just cannot fathom your heart, your love for all of us. Even though we are all sinners, we come short of your glory. Even our very best is nothing but filthy rags before you. And yet in all your mercy,